Hi, everybody, and welcome to SEFLIN's Tech Tuesday Robotics in the Library. My name is Diana Silvera, and I am going to be interviewing today Michael Kimono. He's the Director of STEAM and Making at the Fayetteville Free Library. He worked as a secondary educator before joining the Fayetteville Free Library in the summer of 2003. Michael received his MS ED in Literacy from SUNY Cortland in 2011. His primary responsibilities are facilitating STEAM and making program creation and execution for the Fayetteville Free Library. We are so lucky to have him today and to learn all about how they're doing it at this library. So if this is your first Tech Tuesday, this is not your typical webinar where we're all going to sit back and listen to Mike speak. I'm actually going to interview him during the presentation. And again, my name is Diana Silvera from Navarre Library Services. And during the presentation, I encourage you to ask questions yourself, and I will read them into the interview, and it should be a fun learning experience for everybody. So are you related to Maria from Kimono from Syracuse? That's the first question.
Oh, Maria Samino. Yeah, no, actually, there's a lot of Saminos around here, but I'm originally from Rochester, New York, so a little farther to the west. So I don't know her.
Our first stumper. We're going to try and stump you today. So,
Yeah.
So before we get started, I wanted to know just a little bit about Fayetteville Free Library. What kind of library is it? What's the population size and things like that?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me, Diana. So the Fayetteville Free Library, we're a free association public library here in central New York, just in the suburbs of Syracuse, in Fayetteville, New York. We have a charter to serve area of about 10,000 people, but that charter is also changing. It's in flux. We really serve a lot more than that. So that number really doesn't really correlate to the breadth of people that we get in at our library system here. But yeah, we were an early adopter of making, and we call STEAM instead of STEM, so science, technology, art, engineering, arts, and math in libraries. And we were actually the first library to provide open access to 3D printers back in 2011. And that was prior to us having a dedicated maker space, but we had the 3D printers available for patrons to use. That's a little, I guess, if you want me to go into any more detail? Or?
No, that's good. So it's awesome that you were one of the first with 3D printing, and then you kind of segue into being one of the first with robots. I don't know if the first, but one of the first libraries. So how did you decide to move into a robotics program?
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that we really try to do here, and along with every library, but is to really kind of listen in and to your community and see where their interests and skill sets are, and where what their expectations of how a library would serve them are. And back just before 2012, we had it was a patron that came in, and he was a grandfather and was talking about a program called FIRST. And FIRST is a global program that does robotics in a competition kind of setting, and using Legos in one of the divisions, and it's called FIRST Lego League. And really wanted to see, kind of share the passion that his grandkids had for Lego and do something together as kind of like a family. And was like, there's no other FIRST Lego League opportunity available in the area, and why doesn't the library get into this FIRST Lego League? And that's where we realized that there was a demand out there for robotics, and with Lego, it just kind of adds to that demographic that's interested in it too. So it was around before 2012, where 2012 we formally started a FIRST Lego League, and that team there was formed, and they range in grade level from 4th grade to 8th grade. So there's a certain target demographic that you have to be in. That's set by the organization, not through the library.
Okay.
So we have this 4th through 8th grade thing. But that's really where we started, and we quickly realized with an outpouring of interest in being part of this Lego League is that they also have stipulations on how many kids can be a part of a team. And we realized that there were so many people that were interested in it. There was a whole interview process, a whole process in order to get who our team would be. But then what do we do with all those other kids and families that are interested in the same type of thing? And that's really was the growth of our robotics kind of programming and events that we still do today. That's what gave us that was the point of creation at that point.
That's always like amazing when you're like, I had to like push people away from the program because there's so much interest.
Yeah, it was that ended up leading into whole programs just dedicated to Lego robotics with those the like the Mindstorms kit, now the EV3 kits. But yeah, it was huge, and that just kind of that was just the tip of the iceberg. All other forms of robotics kind of started to follow suit, especially as they started to become more and more available and kind of into mainstream. There's so many robotics kits and things out there nowadays. But yeah, at the time we really did a lot with Lego because it was easy to use, relatively inexpensive, and the capabilities were, really wherever the program or the patrons wanted it to be. It really was left a lot to the attendees of the program to design whatever they wanted.
Oh, that's really nice, as opposed to the ones that are sort of like you have to do exactly what they're telling you to do.
Yeah, there's those have that's one of the things that we look for, and I might even go into more depth later, but it is kind of that vetting process of how, is this worth investing in? Is this something that we could get multiple uses out of, or is this like a one-time kind of shop thing? What we find is that whether it might be in just the build of the robot itself, might be a program. We've done that a few times. We have some mechanoid robots, which really don't lend themselves too well to like programming a robot, but the design portion of it was a program in itself. And actually, there was a lot of turnout for it, so it worked out well. But it was nice to see. It was a construction process, building putting on the servos, how they articulated movement and everything like that. And then we get to use these for these things called robot petting zoos that we have, like every quarter or twice every quarter we do these robot petting zoos.
Oh, that sounds kind of fun. So you were talking about primarily 4th grade to 8th grade, but do you offer programs for younger kids, adults, or do you stick mainly into that age group?
Yeah, so now pretty quickly after that, there was because it was just there was family members that were saying well, he's in 4th grade or she's in 4th grade, but she's got a younger sister that was really interested in Legos or robotics too. So now at this point here, we really do have programming every month. Usually most things are like every other week. Some are just monthly, but they range from kindergarten up through adults.
Oh, wow.
One of the things that we have, some of the people may have heard, there's called Lego We-Dos. There are two versions of We-Dos. There's an old version, and then there's one that uses a Bluetooth module. The older version we do with K through 1, and that program there it actually used to be K through 3, but the turnout is crazy. We usually have around 20 to 25 people, depending on how many staff members are leading that program or community members leading that program. And then we had a wait list that was 3 times the available amount. So what we did was we broke it up into smaller subgroups. So we have K through 1 that do Lego We Do, and then every other week, then we go second through third grade, we do robotics with the Bluetooth module one. That one lends itself a little bit more to they use pretty much the same interface, but we do kind of differentiate that kind of program to fit a little bit older age group there. And then we do kind of like going up through the age ranges here. We have a thing called STEAM Club. STEAM Club does lots of different things. They're not all about robotics, but we'll do stuff with, sometimes we'll do stuff with like Spheros or Dash robots, and that's an age range of 3rd through 5th grade.
Okay.
And then, so we'll do programming and sometimes with Dash, we'll do like storytelling with Dash. So Dash would be programmed to carry out the actions in a story that they make and things like that. Then we kind of move up to coding with Arduino and teens. So they're building not so much the robots themselves, but they're really getting into like the sensors and the kind of bits and pieces that robots use and how that coding would really work. Because robots and coding are like kind of one and the same. You can't really have one without the other. Right. So in that coding for Arduino thing, we talk about how to program servos and microcontrollers to like power or sense like different inputs, whether it's an ultrasonic sensor, light sensors, things like that, to read environmental things, temperature, shock sensors. And then we kind of go up through, we do have robot petting zoos that I was saying. It's really a family kind of based program. We open up our community room and we'll have out Ozobots, little, they're like ping pong sized robots that follow around with different color coded line segments and things like that. It's really good to get younger kids interested in coding because it's just color coding. And we'll have Dash out. We'll have our mechanoid robot out walking around. You could like talk to him. You could, if you could tell him to walk with you, he'll raise his hand and you kind of walk around the room. Kids really love that. We'll have Spheros out. We'll do Sphero Olympics. So Spheros will be coded. You'll have to code them to do certain tasks and things like that. We have trying to think of some of the other ones, but yeah, that's what those kind of like robot petting zoos are. So that's open to the family. And then adult side, we do a coding with Arduinos for adults. We do have an adult robotics club that meets, and that's just community members that meet up here. They run that whole thing. They're working on a robot called Dewey. And Dewey ends up going, the goal of Dewey is to navigate the library on its own and kind of be a kind of an assistant. So if somebody needs assistance, it could navigate its way back to a desk, a reference desk, or it's anything like that. And they're working on that, and it's coming along pretty well. It's got it's getting some good obstacle avoidance code in there and things like that. It could pretty much pick up on what's in the room and navigate its way around it pretty well. It still runs into things, but they're getting the quirks out of it. And then we have the first Lego League and first Tech Challenge. So those are both robotics leagues through FIRST. They're club-based, so it's kind of weird because here we have programs that are open to everybody, and then the FIRST teams are really open for during an interview process, and then that club is made for that year. So that team is made, so that there's the whole interview process behind that. But we do have FIRST Tech Challenge now. So with FIRST, we really cover from 4th grade through 12th grade in terms of providing an opportunity for robotics and coding for those kids, school-age kids.
I love that. We had a follow-up question real quick.
Yeah.
Your Arduino, what coding languages are you focusing on?
Oh, coding. So looking at coding, we do Java, CSS, HTML. We do some C++, and then with the and then even some Python. Scratch. We do a lot of times in Steam Club. We'll do Scratch programming. So yeah, but the Arduino stuff's based off of really C++, and those are our big ones, though.
Does anybody else have any additional questions before we move forward? Joe, did that answer your question?
Yeah, great.
All right. Well, maybe people are typing. So this sounds like this massive program, and you have such a small community library. How does this fit into the overall library?
Yeah, so our library really is it's known in our area, in our region, in our state. I'd even stretch to say, in the nation, to that we are STEM focused and STEAM and STEM focused. So all of this robotics and coding, this really provides the more tangible kind of thing, especially for coding, to see your code outputted into actions that a robot's carrying out. So really, it fits well with our theme because it's literacy. It's 21st century literacy. It's providing access to information, but we're outside of the scope of something that's written, or in an online database. It's just this is literacy, but whether it be CAD modeling literacy, the lines of code and what those languages are, that literacy. But even like in our fab lab, in our makerspace, it branches out. I mean, we have pottery stuff, we have paint, canvas stuff, we have the painting programs. It's all making, fabrication, inventiveness, entrepreneurship. It's a natural fit for our library, because we've set our mission to be a place for access for our community for all these different types of literacies.
Well, and I like how you say that, because I do think computer literacy and coding literacy are so much of the future. I mean, the ability to do that is in every job function almost now.
Yeah.
Asking a question, how have you all worked with any VR programs in your system? If so, how did it go?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we were, prior to Google Cardboard being purchased by Google, we were actually a pilot site for, I forget the name of the company, but it's Google Cardboard. So we did a couple programs with it, and at the time, and so it was it's like VR, but like just touching on virtual reality, because you're not really interactive with it. But it was great. It was a great turnout. And now we actually have an Oculus Rift station in the makerspace here, and so we have different programs to play around with. There's the International Space Station one, but there's modeling ones, like sculpting, and it's been good. We're still fairly new at it. We wanted to make it so nobody got sick or anything like that. We were like, how long can you watch this before you get like queasy? But we have it so that it works with your library card. You sit down, you log in, you get 30 minutes, and yeah, people have been really enjoying it. And we're still messing around with outputting some sculpting files so that we can 3D print them too. So kind of tie that VR into a tangible object too, through the 3D printer.
That's going to be amazing, and that really is the next level, is trying to integrate all of these things instead of just having them in little areas.
Yeah, like piecemeal. Yeah, they all work together, and that's why we try to just facilitate the framework and trainings that people can use all those in conjunction with whatever their idea is, so that they can come to fruition.
Exactly. So, and we can kind of go past even just the robotics with this, but how do you, I mean, because you are almost nationally known, as you said, but how do you promote the robotics program? And you mentioned the teams, but how many kids are actually on one of these teams?
Yeah, so the teams are capped. I think it's at 15. We don't usually go over 12 in the groups. Those are for the first programs. In terms of, so that, like, again, that's a little different, because you got to remember those are rules that are outside of our hands. The other stuff, the other programming, we use Twitter, Facebook, Meetup. We cross promoted other programs that we have, especially big, large event ones. We just had a large Halloween party, so we had lots of flyers out, things like that. to kind of promote. We actually have a whole thing of like make your holiday. So it's 12 days of making, essentially personalized gifts for people and things like that. But we do that. We do it with robotics. We promoted our robot petting zoo. That's really how we get our promotion out. And then how many kids are typically involved. We do have certain we do have a registration process. We've been kind of getting away from that because we don't want it to be like, oh, well, all the spots are filled, I'm not going to sign up for it. We want to, even though it is convenient to know about how many people are going to show up. But yeah, and our, like I said, Lego We Do, I think it's like a 20 to 25 kid program, and that's typically booked. Same thing with the older We Do program. We're usually running like 18 to 20 something kids, with a wait list. Not everybody shows up from the wait list to check in, and that's why we get those little gaps in things. STEAM Club is something that's usually running around 12 to 15 kids every other week. We do that program there it's different. Every Wednesday for us is a STEM or STEAM program. The STEAM Club lends itself more to the robotics side and coding things than some of the other ones.
Okay.
But we're typically 12 to 15 on those. And I mean, so we have, and those are, kids that a lot of them return for STEAM Club, but we'll get in new kids here and there, and they kind of become the core group for a while. But yeah, and then adult coding, things like that. That's a group of probably about like people that we could pretty much bank on coming on Thursdays are about 12, 15 people, but the group is a lot larger on Meetup. So there's a lot of people on meetup.com that are part of our CNY makers group, and they come in and out. But I think they're at like 30 something for that kind of group there, and that's not even anything that we really we just facilitate the space, and we promote for them and things like that. It was started with a volunteer of ours. So yeah, so we get a lot of the reason why we have so many offerings too is to try and meet the demand for it. So we're always trying to see, whenever we see the wait list, and that's why we like the registration part of it, the wait list gives us the feedback and the data to say, this is a program that we've got to put another offering out so that we can kind of meet that demand.
That makes sense. And it really lends itself to that whole, the library being a community, a third place, or that community space. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, Dave had a question. If coding is a 21st century form of literacy, will that eventually replace the fundamentals of education, reading, writing, arithmetic?
Yeah, we get that question too. What about what about books? What about the traditional? We have, in our Fab, we have a bookshelf that has all reference material for our different coding languages, anything, how to use some of the tools. So for us, it's not a replacement of, but it's seen as a supplement, to what is already offered typically in a library. So in the 22nd century, I don't really know, but I mean, here right now we don't look at it as we're replacing what is traditional forms with new. We're just adding more.
It's just like on top of. It's not replacing.
Yeah. Because really, the underlying, you might know and we get a lot of that already. And some of that's how we know when kids need to check out new other programs that we have, like when we're using like Scratch programming on some of the young kids, and they're like, yeah, but like I drag this over and it'll tell my sprite to move so far, but like what's that code actually look like? Well, that code there, that line of code is still at the basics of it, the foundation of it. It's still going to be conventional C++, coding. And same thing with robotics. When you're dealing with servo controls and things like that, there's so much, especially in the first programs, where it really comes down to they still got to know math, they still need to know calculus, they still got to figure these things out on a piece of paper to figure out if they could get the torque values that they need, to lift up the mechanism that they're trying to do. And it's still there, even though, it's just the ease of coding and robotics is kind of, like whether it's a Sphero or Dash or Dot, it's just they're hiding the foundations of all this stuff. And what we find is that as the kids get older or the adults get more knowledge of it, they want to know how does it still work? It's not enough, so it's still there, that interest.
Well, it kind of breaks that level, and like, oh, when I do this, this happens. And then once you kind of get past, if I click and drag, it's like, well, how do I get it to do this next level? And then you get into the actual coding behind it, which is always a great foundation for that. That's how we out.
Right.
So, so we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but the programming you do with kids and adults, is it mostly you and staff doing, sort of leading it along, or do you have a lot of community involvement in doing these different programs?
Yeah. So with it, it's really a whole team effort. What we do is here we don't really have departments in our library, and instead there are like there's forums. There's a STEAM forum. There's a program and event forum. There's like an access forum. These forums meet every month, and so at that time it's a forum and everybody's invited to that. So everybody sits down at the STEAM forum, even if it's not really typically like in their wheelhouse. It's not that we have those departments, but everybody's invited, and that's where we kind of say, okay, what's next? Here's program proposals. You got a new proposal for, whether, it might be a day of STEM learning, or, we just had one recently for week. There's computer science week and the coding day. So those are in conjunction with each other in December there. So we just had that. What's this event going to look like? Is this, this week-long event? We have, how do we want to, do a holiday code your holiday card kind of thing? Who wants to run that? Do we have community members that have this skill set? So it takes a lot of the team to kind of pull everything together. We, all the programs look at, first off, staff availability, but also of our community members, and using, we have a staff member that just, one of her jobs is community engagement and participation. So she kind of works with those community members to see who's out there that has this knowledge. And a lot of times they're the ones that actually come up with some of the ideas for some of the things that we want to do. So they might be the leads for it, or they might just co-lead it. But then that's a whole nother process of how we like interview people and get them into kind of volunteer and kind of express their interests and skill sets too. But yeah, it's a whole team effort. It's not just one person. Yeah.
I feel like that thing when you were just describing that you guys don't have like the traditional departments is like a whole other webinar that we need to explore. I'm like, my head just kind of like went a little shocked. I don't know if everybody else.
Yeah. I know it is again, not going through formal education as to become a librarian, kind of coming into this job and realizing that how different it is at other places. We're not really departmentalized or anything like that. So it is one of the other things too about
my head just like exploded a little when you said that. Like, that's awesome.
It is. It's cool because it might be. It really comes down to like for somebody like we have a librarian that's local history librarian, but that's not the only thing that she does, and she does STEM programming. So sometimes it's something that we co-lead with another staff member, and we do a lot of training within the library. So some of those forums, those times in there that we meet up, those are actually times that we train on things, whether it is, hey, this is, these are the new Dash and Dots, or this is the new Spheros. We're going to run through the whole programming interface and things like that, and how patrons would use it and things like that. So that when we do have these events, like a robot petting zoo, it's not just the same 3 people doing, staff members doing these robot petting zoos. Instead, you'll have a mixture. It might be, our outreach librarian, it might be, clerks from up front, things like that. So
When it gives everybody more of a chance, sometimes like when your job is something, it's sort of, you ignore what else is going on because you're focused on it. So that kind of evens it out. And I love that, like, your local history and STEM. I mean, I can't say that you see that at a lot of libraries, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, it is because things change so quickly. Everybody, and there's so many different perspectives on it. You can quickly get kind of lost, trying to stay up on everything that's, out there. Is just you'd go crazy trying to do it just with one person. So having these forums allow things to come into proposal ideas, or even just become into awareness for the whole group, when you wouldn't normally, I might miss it. I might not know that this was computer science week, or that there's a mini maker fair that's going on, an hour and a half away from us. So you really benefit as an organization and providing programs for the community by having this big forum and having, all these people there with their ideas.
That's wonderful. So overall, what do you see that the impact of having the robotics at your library and overall for your whole community?
Yeah, it the impact, we see the demand, because we see the demand as the patrons grow. So by providing that access to these technologies across all these demographics, we kind of, they might be kids that were in Lego We Do, but they kind of graduate out of that. That's no longer for them, but now they're really interested in First Lego League. We find lifelong kind of library users. And the other thing is that we're reaching out to people that wouldn't traditionally go to a library. That they're not in it for the more traditional sense of a library, but they're really interested in the robotics portion, or the 3D modeling and 3D printing portion. So we tap into a larger community that we wouldn't normally see, just because they weren't typical library users. And then, yeah.
I was going to say, a lot of these kids, you just wouldn't have robotics available to you any other place.
Yeah, yeah. We've been working with our school district here to bring STEM opportunities to them at the school. And that's something that we're still working on right now. It's just in the beginning stages of it. But yeah, it's something that we see as, again, it's not in no way seen as like a competition thing, but as in a betterment of the entire community. So like in our local district here, now they do have First Tech Challenge teams, but we meet on different nights. So it provides an extra opportunity for people that maybe that kid that was really interested in it couldn't do it through the school district because they meet on Thursday nights and they can't do Thursday nights anymore. Well, we meet on Monday nights. Okay. It provides an opportunity, and you're literally within the same neighborhood, where it can be, you could look at maps of where these first programs are. There's gaps all across the country. So if libraries were to kind of take up that area, those gaps, it's just providing more and more opportunity and access for kids at these great opportunities here. And one of the other things too, and we kind of touched on it before, I think you said it, it's really comes down to like robotics, coding, making, STEM stuff is so social. It's not the networking and the connections that you make to other people, because there was a really kind of interesting thing that happened. We do trainings on 3D printers. So we train we could do online video, but there used to be just in-person trainings. We had this, and it takes about a half an hour. You sit down. We had a group of people here, and they were working on the 3D printers, trained, And as they got talking, one realized like they were a patent. One was a patent lawyer. The other one was this guy that had this, his idea, this invention that spurred this conversation. We had another instance where we had a couple kids that were just coming out of, I think it was Upstate Medical, that's up here, that were they were creating a startup. It's called iCore Therapeutics. And they had all these like bargain bin old 80s robotic arms that they were using with pipettes and all this stuff. And they were trying to 3D design stuff that their arms could pick up. Well, the robotics team was meeting that night, and all of a sudden there was like the robotics team was like, oh my gosh, we got this whole we got these 3 kids and they have all these ideas on how to make this arm work, but they don't know how to do it. The robotics team's there. So this connection was made, all in just having to have a community, club meet, and some other inventors in the area come in, just happen to 3D print, and the next thing you know, they started this working together on things. So that whole social side of it too is great.
And that's important. There's not a lot of places to connect in the community sometimes.
Yeah,
that is really important.
Yeah, some places have maker spaces, for-profit maker spaces. We do have one that's in the city, and but it's kind of in flux. It changes. It was once a kind of a dirty maker space, welding, woodworking tools. I think now it's more a clean lab where it's 3D printing and CAD stuff. So, but yeah, the more opportunities you provide a community for this kind of stuff, you get the better access and outreach or reach to those people that, to mess around, play around, and become inventors. So
what has been the biggest surprise? I wrote the lab, but I meant like of the whole robotics sort of movement.
Yeah.
Library.
I think the biggest surprise is the turnout, is the how many people are actually interested in it, especially at that beginning point where like we weren't doing like any kind of coding, and then here's first Lego League, we reach out for interviews and things like that, and realize that there's this whole base that wants robotics. They want all the STEM coding stuff. So that was our biggest surprise would be how many patrons were looking for something and just never had an output for it.
So what's the flip side of that? What's been the hardest thing for you? The biggest challenge that you've faced?
I'd say probably the biggest challenge is keeping up with, staying current. I think every library, faces that, realizing what to stop doing and what to, and shift gears to do. But with robotics and STEM and coding and things like that, there's just a pervasiveness of all these new kits, cool robots and things like that. But then kind of vetting them and seeing like, is this worth putting the time in or the money in to say, this is something that could be a long-term program, or is this just something that's going to be a one-time shot? That is it really worth our money to do that and to the community? As a valuable use of taxpayer money. So that keeping up with that, and the forums help with that, and really that informal and formal conversations we have with our community and volunteers. That's a big portion of our library too, is how we collect that data and see what to do next, or what to stop doing, or what to expand on. Like the most basic sense of with it was the Lego We Do. We provided that opportunity and quickly saw that it was actually, there was way more demand than originally what we could offer. So it was a way that it was an enlightening point where we're like, we have to look for community members, whether in that case teens, to help assist in these programs so that we can do them more. So we do have like teens that assist us, and adult community members too. that help us in these different programs.
Okay.
But that's a challenge. Yeah.
So I know that a lot of people who are sitting here thinking are like, well, it must be nice. We don't have that kind of budget. So how expensive is this to start and run?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you want to do. If like, and it's not exactly, but like first, there's an annual expense to that. First has registration fees, and then in First Tech Challenge, every time you go to a qualifier, there's a fee. Plus, you're talking about getting, they're called Tetrix kits of servos and beams and all this stuff. So that is expensive. However, there are so many other opportunities for coding, and even if you really look at it, in the coding and robotics, especially if you're looking at it in the subparts, like I said, was coding with Arduino. Well, coding in itself there's so many free, as long as you got a computer to work on, you could go on to code.org and things like programs like that, like Scratch. And what the coding with Arduino is a small Arduino kit. It's I think it's like a $30 kit, and it comes with so many different things. It comes with the lesson plans already, that one there, so you can control servos and do counters and displays. And there's one, the one has a touchscreen display. So it has the components in which you would put them onto a robot. And those programs right there are relatively cheap. When you're talking $30, we usually have them with pairs or in groups of 3 that they're working together on that. So if you could get 7 or 10 kits, even, you're talking about a huge attendee list that you could have run, and those are all reusable kits. Okay. And then the other thing too, if you're really focusing on the coding of robotics, we've done things with coding with binary bracelets. So just make some cool bracelets. They usually say, they might have their names on it and things like that, but they're just using beads, and it's super cheap, and it's coding. So it's the foundations for that robotic stuff. It just depends on where you want to get into it at. But yeah.
Do you offset any of the costs with grants? Have you looked into that, or
we always look for stuff like that, and we apply. We have again, that's one of the things that we talk about in our forums too. Is if we ever get any kind of, we're always looking for grants, and then there's teams that'll work on grants to write together. So that does help. We don't hear, but some of the other. A lot of like first teams, they do fundraising. So fundraising to offset the cost of things, it's not uncommon at all. If you look up first, you pretty much, I think even in their like little playbook that they make, they even talk about, they have all the fundraising kind of ideas and things like that. That helps offset. And one of the other things, it gets really even deeper into things, but it is looking at the data and looking at what things you stop doing in your library, in your organization. What's the turnout? What's the draw to it? Is this, whether it's a database that you're paying for, or if it's a program that you're running? We don't do a one-time performer kind of things. We don't do like, Joe the Magician kind of shows and things like that, because we don't find that one-time program and the cost for it is efficient use of that money. Okay. So we really look to see how can we get multiple uses out of something. So that's a larger kind of talk into what looking at what you continue doing and what you stop doing, but reallocation of funds is big too.
So I believe I already asked that question. So while people are typing in questions for you, if you had one piece of advice to someone who was just thinking about starting this at their library, what would you tell me? Like,
it's one thing. All right, so
the toss up between the two. I guess maybe if you can merge it, then but look to your community and don't wait until you have all the parts. So don't wait until you have, well, we have coding opportunities for every age demographic. If you can only do coding at a 4th to 8th grade level or 3rd through 5th grade level, just start. Because that's going to provide you with so much knowledge as the feedback, whether it be, you know, even training or finding volunteers, but then finding, I would really say just start, because you're going to hear what other types of robotics and STEM things that those patrons want to see.
I can see that, especially with the library users that I know. They will provide lots of input. Please type in some questions while we have Mike here. We're going to start wrapping up the session, so please make sure all of your questions are answered. And we want to know from you guys, how many of you have a robotics program or are thinking of starting one?
Yeah, that kind of starting with what you have is big. It's really it's a different topic, but that's like our Fab Lab. We started with one 3D printer. We had community members help us build it, but now at our current state, we have 9 3D printers available to the public. So it wasn't like in our Fab Lab, there wasn't a Fab. It was our community room. We'd roll out a cart and it had duct tape on it. It had a 3D printer, had some other making crafts. So we didn't have a Fab Lab, but our community room was turned into one every so often for our program. So just starting helps you to find a path where your community sees, in this case, robotics and coding.
Okay, we have a bunch of questions. They want to know a lot more about the Arduino kits.
Oh yeah. There's so many out there right now. The one that we are currently using is called it's from DF Robotics. I think it's dfrobot.com or something like that. And I think it's called like the best Arduino kit or something like that. But there's so many others out there. One thing I would look for when you're looking for those Arduino kits, see if they have a program, not a program, but example lessons. You know, and that DF Robot one, I didn't know much about the Arduino at all. However, it provides with, I think it's 20 different examples of things to make. Things from like a traffic light, where you're like, oh, that seems really basic. But if you think about a traffic light with a push button for a crosswalk, the coding that's involved in that is pretty in depth, and it goes through the lines of code that you need and explains what they are, and plus the circuitry too. There's others out there though. I think Elegoo is like that. ELEGOO. That's another company that makes pretty good Arduino coding stuff.
So jumping from Arduino to VR,
yeah.
Couple questions regarding that. First, the first one is, what is it mostly used for? Are you finding it for gaming, education, creativity? Sort of what's the main focus at the library?
Yeah, the Oculus, we're really in a beginning stages for our community. It's right now more of a novelty. They want to experience it. They want, especially with the hand controls that we have. It's it's more like experiencing it. It's not so much like, okay, I'm going to use this now in the creation point. You know, it's more, let me experience it. Let me see how this feels at that stage. But our ultimate goal is to have that as an education creative point, whether it's, you know, a lot of like Google, there's like Google VR classroom kind of things where you take like a virtual field trip, you know, that idea there, an education around, you know, different things, whether it's the International Space Station, stuff like that. That's where our goal is for it. But again,
we have the interest from our community, but the community is kind of, it's so new to them, they don't even really know yet. It's kind of like when we first opened the Fab Lab, there was people that came in and wondered if 3D printers required you to use special 3D glasses. So, it's like it's at that point, at least in our community with VR right now. So our goal is to get to the creative education portion of it.
So do you find that the Oculus Rift is really the way to go, or do you think the PlayStation offers better STEM programs?
Yeah. Right now, our only experience is with Oculus. We had gotten the Oculus, and then we had upgraded our PlayStation game consoles in our teen area around the same time, but it was prior to that PlayStation VR coming out. Right now, we're with Oculus. We've been happy with it. It's I'm like looking at it right now. It's we got I forget what they're called, but we do have the hand controls for it. I think it's like touch. I think it's just Oculus Touch. But yeah, that really adds a whole new layer to the VR. I would definitely recommend having some portion like that. So the PlayStation VR would have that already. If you're going to look at an Oculus, I'd say get with the touch handsets too.
So Jessica, we have so many comments here I'm trying to go through. Jessica's saying we're hoping to start small by borrowing robotics from our regional library support group and utilizing the time of the grant-funded technology trainer our library has hired in the planning stages, but they're getting close to getting started, which is really exciting. And Deb says almost the same thing. They're starting a robotics lab, and she mentioned that she's learning from the kids because it's just sort of overwhelming to start. So Jessica's asking, are there other free sample curricula sources that you would recommend?
For around, in that case, coding, then I'm assuming, or
asking about robotics, I think.
Robotics, yeah, robotics. I'm trying to think right now. I mean,
any makerspace topic, actually.
Yeah, that. So I think, and kind of staying with robotics a little bit, there's quite a pretty extensive first tech challenge in robotics forum, and they go into a lot of the issues and solutions that their teams are facing, and all those kits are available to the public. You don't have to be part of FIRST. They're publicly available programming and robotics kits. There's so much to that. I would say that's a really kind of great place to kind of, if you're doing some like deep, high level kind of coding and robotics stuff. But the stuff that a lot of the programs like Sphero have learning modules in them. Those are great. It's like a BB-8 robot, a little ball that'll roll around. But you could it's a robot. You code it, and there's actually a lot of sensors on it. I can't think of anything off the top of my head other than those types of things, though.
As a follow-up, do you have any projects with RPI? And if you could explain if you know what RPI is, because I'm not sure.
Yeah, RPI. No, I'm not. I'm not sure what that is.
Just you can type in on the box what that is while and someone's asking about a transcript. This is going to be on the SEFLIN website, so you can review it afterwards, and you'll be able to catch up with everything there.
Raspberry Pi. Yeah. Sorry. We've done with the Raspberry Pi. We've done some program. It didn't catch on as much as the Arduino for our community. One of the other things too was with the Raspberry Pi was also having
it available and having having a display monitor for the Raspberry Pi because it's graphical user interface. But we've used the Raspberry Pi, I think, more internally than through programs. Like little Linux stations that we've been toying around with, and the Robotics Club does use a combination of Arduinos and a Raspberry Pi. So they use it, but we don't have a program specifically for Raspberry Pi. No.
Okay, we're gonna bounce around a little bit back here to the Oculus Rift and the Touch VR. Can you, for someone who doesn't know what Touch VR is, can you explain what that is?
Okay, yeah. So Touch VR, so imagine like a game controller, and imagine that your left and right hands, you would hold onto that controller, but imagine them being separate. You could separate it now. So your right hand is going to be holding something that feels like half of a typical Xbox controller. The other half is in your other hand. When you move your hands around, they're actually visible in VR. So if you're doing like a mountain climbing VR game, there's actually your hands will appear in front of you, and you won't have the feedback of running into, like, let's say the rock, but instead you would literally move your hands to, as far as you could reach, grab onto the rock, and then you have to pull yourself as if you're hanging onto the rock, squeezing the trigger and squeezing that touch control and pulling yourself in. So that's what we mean by like that Touch VR. You're interacting with it more than it would just be a typical game controller. You have to actually do the motion with your hand and your arms to do that.
That sounds like my kind of mountain climbing, personally.
Oh, it's fun. It's fun. You look goofy as heck. It's a good shoulder workout too.
So just one additional question about Arduino, and then if I missed your question, if you can retype it, because there's so many here, I'm afraid I'm going to miss them. Is it just one sort of kit, or are there different ones for different age groups or different projects?
So yeah, they're typically different projects. The difference between when we do a teen one and an adult one, the teen one we get into, it ends up coming down to, the idea was the teen one, we would take baby steps in terms of the coding. But it typically, like you were just saying, somebody was mentioning about learning from their teen patrons. The teen one actually runs a lot smoother and faster than the adult one. So we differentiate it based upon really it's the knowledge base of those two groups. So the adult one, we spend more time now than, it's the opposite of what we planned, but we spend more time on the circuitry of it and the lines of code, where the teens are pretty much just they need to know what the components are. What is a photo sensor, what's actually happening there. But then coding wise, they're pretty much, most of them are already on board, and they're pretty good at the coding side of it. So they help each other out. But yeah, so the kits come with different projects already, and that's projects that they like, whatever that company that's selling it kind of packages it with. But Arduino can have there's so many things you could do with it. It's thousands of things you could do. So
just a couple more questions here. I know we're picking your brain in every direction, but do you need special glasses for Oculus VR? Those are the glasses, am I right on that?
Yeah. So with the Oculus VR, you actually can't wear, if you do have glasses, you can't wear the headset and glasses. So you'd have to take your glasses off. But the Oculus it's like a large safety goggles, like the old safety goggles that you'd have in school. It's all blacked out, and there's a screen inside with everything. It straps onto your head. It also has the headphones built in, and they must be like noise canceling ones too, because once you put it, it's very, if you haven't experienced it, you kind of go, I'm going to know that I'm sitting in a chair. I'm going to know that I'm just looking at a TV screen, like something like that.
It really is.
As soon as you put it on, it takes you maybe 30 seconds to a minute, and you're completely like, I don't even remember. You become so immersed in what you're seeing. It's like your orientation kind of goes out the window as to where you are. So we've made sure to make sure that nothing can be ripped off the the table and things like that. Nothing can fall. There's a pretty large area for the people to experience it and not bump into other things or other people.
I've had 2 people comment that they actually wear their glasses with their Oculus, right?
Oh, that's good. We've had most people can't get their glasses and the lens to come into focus. So we've had most people find that they can't do it, but yeah.
And then we just have one more question about the literacy, the most controversial statement of today. The literacy is the literacy of the 21st century for coding. Will that replace the fundamentals of education?
I'm sorry, what was that?
The coding is the literacy of the 21st century that we talked about. Is that going to replace the fundamentals of education?
Well,
we kind of touched on that earlier, that it sort of supplements.
Yeah, and as an educator, in my previous, in my formal education and everything like that, I don't think so. I don't, because there's still the how. It's whether it's like I was mentioning, like with robotics, with coding, with making, STEM stuff. If you gotta I think we'd go down a slippery slope if we start to exclude the how do we get to this point. It's fine for, we do dash robots use pretty much scratch programming. But if we were to just go, oh, it's already there, somebody has to put that graphical user interface together. And that interface is going to be traditional coding. And the math behind that, whether it's the RPMs, are you using, in that case there, I think you could make dash rotate so many RPMs, or you can make it go in distance. There's still math there that was coded in. We're just making it easier for a consumer to use it. I think if we were to get away from the fundamentals of that, that would be a problem. So that's definitely not what we do here. And I think hopefully we'll never get away from that, but yeah.
Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. I'll give everybody one more chance to type in a last-minute question, but I wanted to leave you with Mike's contact information, and mine is there as well. So please contact him for questions. Contact me if you have other ideas for Tech Tuesdays. Jasmine's saying she's heard the future programs will write their own coding, and that coding is going to become obsolete.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I think that's when Skynet becomes active, and then we have the AI portion. Yeah, it's that in itself. That's I think Elon Musk had something to say about that. It was kind of interesting, but yeah.
Oh, Mike, I can't thank you enough for taking the time today to talk to us a little bit about the robotics program at your library. And as Joe said, we'll all go run for our lives at that point.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Run for your life, then we go back to reading and writing. Exactly. On a stone tablet. Yeah.
I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon, and thank you all for coming today. And thank you, Mike, once again. This was a fabulous session.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everyone.